Welcome to Tangled in Truth, the Red Thread. I'm Jess. I'm really excited to have you guys back for episode 4 now, I believe. Now, last time I did promise that we were going to be going into some more quantum physics, metaphysical ideas. Basically, as Dolores Cannon's books would put it, we're going to be covering metaphysical concepts that border quantum physics, as well as some terms that are widely used in quantum physics. Now, I promise today's not going to be all a science lesson. The reason I'm taking time to explain these base structures is just so that when I do finally start covering everyday events, everyone has the tools and able to sharpen their discernment and to be able to make informed decisions. And like I said, I'm not a guru. I don't know everything. This is just something I have been, I felt called to do since doing my own research. And I'm just here to anchor the new base frequency to hopefully usher in this new age that I believe will be coming here in 2027. All right, so today I am going to be covering another podcast that I thought did a phenomenal job in explaining a lot of these concepts, and we are going to cover some ancient civilization lore as well as different kind of threads that we'll be pulling on that touch who I would say are most likely the 1% or a part of the 1%. And when I say the 1%, I'm talking about the elite, the 13 families that control the global economy. They're the ones who make the decisions about war. They're the ones who constantly give us propaganda so that way we're divided and always angry and always pointing fingers at the other side. So that way we're too busy fighting each other to look at them. Now, I will be going more into one family in particular, but I'll wait so that way I can kind of tie in, because the family that I'm going to be talking about today is incredibly old. Incredibly old. And my mind honestly has a hard time wrapping itself around the facts that I'm going to be sharing with you today. But they are facts that I have heard from repeated sources, and I feel like it's important for you all to know this. Now, the episode we're going to be covering is from the Sean Ryan show. It is when he had the guest speaker, Billy Carson, on. Now, Billy Carson is someone I share a lot of similar opinions with. He basically believes, and this is a hill I will die on, that we live in a fractal holographic matrix of light. Now, I know that sounds crazy. We're kind of like talking about the matrix, red pill versus blue pill kind of theories and ideas that we'll be going over today. But yeah, let's go ahead and push the brakes, and let's go ahead and start from where Billy starts Sean from. Now, the one thing I want people to be aware of is there is a history. Anyone that grew up in the United States, I know I had no formal education or any knowledge of this particular group until I started looking into fringe topics online. And I want to start with the Freemasons. Now, who are the Freemasons? They are a very secretive group. Now, there are Masonic halls all over the United States, but the Freemasons I'm talking about are basically just a few hundred of them actually know the ancient knowledge that I'm going to be talking about today. Now, I am going to be going off notes again today because I want to make sure I get dates, quotes, and definitions properly explained. I will be sharing a lot of information on the screen here today, as well as linking multiple videos below that go into much better detail than I do. But anyways, let's go ahead and go back to the Freemasons. So, like I was saying, only a few hundred of the actual Freemasons are given access and taught this ancient knowledge. Now, this knowledge that I'm talking about dates back over 30,000 years. That's ancient Egyptian times that we're talking about. It's basically the histories we see on the ancient Egyptian tablets. Now, the particular lore that I would like to touch base on is the one of Amun Ra, the god Ra. So Amun Ra had what was called the Shittu. The Shittu were the Freemasons. They were brick masons back then. Now, the Shittu helped Amun Ra build the world of Chem. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say the world of Chem is basically ancient Egyptian times. I'll go ahead and make sure to double check some of my information this so that way I'm providing the correct stuff. Now, the Shittu had knowledge basically of spaceflight, what we would consider today alien technology. Now, since just as like a little reference to with Amun Ra is the reason why Christians and other denominations will say Amen. It was what he demanded of his followers, Amun Ra. But yeah, anyways, so Amun Ra also is known as Marduk in the Bible, I believe. Now, during his rule, I believe there were what was called two pyramid wars. And during the second pyramid war, the Shittu were the ones who had constructed the pyramids and were able to basically usher Amun Ra through secret passageway in order to into freedom, where he was able to flee. Now, right before he fled, he left the his kingdom basically to the Ra Kham. Now, the Ra Kham loosely translate is shield, and what basically that ends up morphing into our modern language as the Rothschilds. Now, we're going to get more into the Rothschilds, but I want you to understand that this happened over 10,000 years ago. The Rothschilds have been around for 10,000 years. Just let that sink in, and I find it even hard to fathom how much power and influence they have with a family that old. Now, the Rothschilds, their entire family, I believe, is worth a net worth of over $700 trillion, I believe. Now, I believe this is a cumulative of all of them. And just a little side note on the Rothschilds, there are many Rothschilds on board members' seats within many of the mega corporations. And that is also, I'm hoping, another episode I will spend some time in is going onto the mega corporations and how they affect our everyday life. But anyways, rant. So the Rothschilds and the Freemasons, numerology is very important to them. Numbers, symbols have great meaning to them. Now, one of the numbers I believe that is super important for them is 33. Now, why is 33 important? 33 in the spiritual community is known as the master number. And even I want to say, I believe Billy was saying that even at the space station in Florida, the lane is 33 because of the symbolic of that, as well as when it comes to space travel, we have to travel 33 times the speed of sound in order to make it to space. So a little bit into how numerology and some of the synchronicities with our everyday life and some of the esoteric concepts that we'll be touching on. Now, a little bit on the Freemasons as well that I found was absolutely fascinating was one of their most well-known members was Jesus or Yeshua. He actually had the ability to tap into higher consciousness, his higher self, other dimensions. And because of that ability, I believe he was probably able to perform what people thousands of years would consider miracles. But I think what we might hear in the next couple decades just consider science. But yeah, I found that incredibly fascinating that Jesus or Yeshua was a Freemason. So let's see. I think I've touched on the importance of that. Now, earlier when I was mentioning the Freemasons and there being information as well as secrets to alien technology, space travel carved into these bricks, some examples and stories of tablets that actually are available to the public that I believe you can actually just Google and find. Ancient tablet examples are the 7 tablets of creation, the Astrasis epic, as well as the Code of Hammurabi, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Mahabharata, and many, many, many other. I think there's hundreds of different stone tablets that have lore and history that is not necessarily mainstream, and some people consider fringe, but it's there, it's written, it's been there for thousands of years. Now, with these tablets, a lot of our modern religions contain roots within these tablets, thus touching on a lot of theories that certain people believe that all religions are somehow related to the same thing, but just slightly differ based on region, landscape, culture, other things like that. But yeah, I definitely believe that a lot of ancient technology and ancient information that has been hidden from us has a root to what happens and basically persuades certain religions nowadays. Anyways, okay, so next thing I wanted to get into is a little bit more about these bricks in technology. Is there's also theories going around that our ancient pyramids were communication devices, generators, energy generators, and a lot of people are starting to get a lot more steam behind these ideas. And I want to say they've even had recent archaeology discoveries where they've been able to take scans below certain pyramids, and there are columns that go hundreds of feet, which kind of starts to give substance to these theories that these pyramids at one point when the Nile actually ran beneath them were a generator of what I would say is 0-point energy. And if you remember, I talked about 0-point energy in the last episode, and I honestly believe that ancient technologies, certain civilizations were far more advanced than we are today, but this technology has been hidden from us. Billy even talks about there being evidence in the sand of war, of advanced weapons fire basically that had formed glass balls in the sand, and that can only be formed under specific, really intense hot temperatures. But yeah, basically just a little more sprinkle of information to help hopefully give more weight and girth to what the information that I'm sharing with you today. Now, while we're talking a little bit more about 0 point energy, I want to kind of veer in the direction of CERN. Now, what is CERN? CERN is I want to say it's a facility underground in Switzerland, I believe. And it is where they have a large hadron collider. And what they are doing is they are taking atoms as well as particles, and they are shooting them at each other, making them collide at the speed of light, and they're actually creating microscopic black holes. Now, you might be asking, why are they trying to create microscopic black holes? Now, Billy Carson believes that these aren't necessarily just accidents, them creating these microscopic black holes. They're actually trying to learn how to create a black hole and stabilize it enough so something can pass through, thus creating a portal. Now, what am I talking about? I'm touching base on the topic of wormholes. Now, I'm really excited to do this because I have seen this example so many times, but I have not had the chance yet to get to do this. I'm excited. Okay, so the best way I can describe what a wormhole is, and this actually is going to touch on the idea of why we're actually not able to gain access to space travel, is because of our ability or I guess lack of ability to see outside of linear time. Now, what am I talking about linear time? Well, in other dimensions that we're going to be touching on later in this episode, in the third dimension, we're the only ones who experience linear time. Now, before I get too far, let's go ahead and go back to wormholes. Now, wormholes. I'm going to rip a piece of paper out here. Now, what I'm talking about when it comes to space travel, what our science gets stuck on when it comes to point A and point B. Let's give an example. Let's say about 10,000 light years, just as an example. That's what I'm talking about here. Point A to point B is going to take 10,000 light years. Now, what the Large Hadron Collider is trying to do is stabilize a wormhole, and this is where it gets a little crazy. What they're trying to do is to take linear time and fold it. What they're trying to do, instead of taking the 10,000 light years to travel from point A to point B, they're trying to create a black hole, a wormhole at point A, and make it so that way hold time, get that wormhole, you're going to punch through and make an instant shortcut. And instead of taking that 10,000 light years, it happens instantly. Now, they have not, to our knowledge, been able to stabilize this because it is obviously very difficult work to do. But this is the basic concept that is keeping us from space travel. Now, it is worth noting that there are what are called X points, And X points are actually natural occurring portals at specific points around the globe where in certain lore it has been mentioned you could walk through a stone wall in one country and walk out of a tree or walk out of another doorway in another country and you're completely on the other side of the world. Now, there's also X points around the sun and even outside of our atmosphere. Now, this is where some conspiracy theories get into the idea of where these portals already being used by extraterrestrials or higher dimensional beings that are not of this particular reality. Now, there's also a conspiracy out there that, since we're kind of going into the timelines, that say that because of the black hole and the wormhole experiments that they're doing, that they actually created a black hole so big that they destroyed our reality and we've now all transferred to a slightly different reality. Thus why we see mandala effects. But there's a lot of discussion around that, specifically around timeline jumps, kind of like what I had mentioned in previous videos of, you know, one being slightly different on one timeline and being different on another. And because we have the ability to jump from timeline to timeline, it causes what we see as the mandala effect. Now, I want to start diving into dimensions, our three-dimensional world, first dimension, second dimension, so on and so forth. But before we do that, I want you to understand that everything is frequency. Everything is frequency. And what I mean by that is everything has what's called a subatomic frequency. I can't remember if I mentioned in my last video or not, but there was an invention that was called the Rife machine. And what it did was it was able to vibrate at a very specific frequency. It was the resonant frequency of the cancer virus, and it shot the frequency at the virus and managed to kill the cancer virus without harming any of the healthy tissue around the cancer itself, thus leaving the patient cancer-free. Now, with subatomic frequencies, I will also say that different realities, different dimensions also have their own subatomic frequency. And I'm kind of touching on the idea of, you know, if a higher dimensional being is able to match our resonant frequency of 3D, so like a fifth dimensional, fourth dimensional being being able to lower their frequency or change it to ours, they're able to materialize and manifest in our 3D world here. Now, with the dimensions, it has actually been proven with scientific experiments that our brain actually connects to 11 different dimensions. And let's see. I think the best way for me to explain this is doing another paper explanation, because I had a hard time grasping it until I was actually able to see what it looked like as well. So what I'm going to be talking about is the first, second, and third dimension. Now, being in the third dimension, we are able to manipulate the first and second. That being said, I would also stand by the theory that a fourth or fifth dimensional being is able to, in some ways, manipulate our 3D reality. Now, what do I mean first dimension? What is a first dimension? First dimension is just a line. One dimension. Two dimensions are two-dimensional objects, and that is what we often see with pictures. You know, me working in dentistry, I look at two-dimensional x-rays. This is the example of two dimensions. Now I'm going to be using the example of a square. This is what would be considered a two-dimensional object. Now, what I'm going to be drawing is technically a two-dimensional object with the illusion of being 3D, but this is the dimension we live in. This is what I'm talking about when I say third dimension. Now, I am no artist, so I apologize, but this is the only way I can see for it to make the most sense. Three dimension. Woo! Excuse me. 1, 2, 3. Now, fourth dimension, I am going to see if I'm able to add a photo in this part of the video that kind of goes on to fourth and fifth and sixth dimensions. So that way it's a little bit easier to grasp. But the reason I'm bringing this up is after the third dimension, the fourth dimension, being a fourth dimensional being, you are able to see past, present, and future. So fourth dimension for us would be what we consider is time. Now, what do I mean when they can see past, present, and future? The best example is, say you get home at night, you get home, you eat dinner, you shower, and then you go to bed. You know, what that fourth dimensional being is going to see is they're going to see in one image of you entering the house, you eating dinner, you taking a shower, and you in bed. They're able to see all of that at once because they don't live in the same 3D linear reality that we live in, because we are here to experience growth, and the best way to experience growth is through linear time. Now, the other thing about the fourth dimension I want you to understand is us being 3D, we technically live in the shadow of a fourth dimensional object. Now, what do I mean, fourth dimensional object? What could I be alluding to? What possible things are there? I highly recommend you looking into quasi-crystals. Now, a quasi-crystal is, let's see, did I write down a good explanation on it? Yes, let's see. I guess I'm going to wait on that. We are going to touch base on quasi-crystals, but I'm afraid if I bring it up now, it's going to throw all the other information that I have currently laid out, and it might make it more confusing. So bookmark that, save it for later. We will be talking about the quasi-crystals. But before we go on to that, I wanted to touch base on quantum entanglement, and I want to bring that up before bringing the rest of it up. Now, quantum entanglement. What is quantum entanglement? Quantum entanglement is, the best way I could describe it is if you take two protons and you quantum entangle them. What you're going to do is, once they're quantum entangled, say you take one and you shoot it as far as you can at the other end of the universe, what we call the event horizon. Doesn't matter how far, it can be infinite amount of space away. Now, the one I have, electron proton, I'm not sure what would be the best explanation for that. If I switch the rotating, say it's rotating one way, and I switch it to rotate the other that is on the other end of the universe will immediately, in tandem, start rotating the exact same way because they're quantum entangled. Now, a lot of the higher dimensional beings use this quantum entanglement as a way of communicating. And I believe that is actually what some of our deep state stuff is looking into. Now, kind of, I guess, the exact description I'm trying to give you about quantum entanglement is, if you take what's called parabolic down conversion, that is the actual process of quantum entangling particles. And like I was saying earlier, I'll leave information on the screen so that way it gives a better, more in-depth explanation as to what I'm talking about today. All right. Now that we covered that, Let's see. Um, so I did want to talk about kind of another fringe idea that will kind of help hopefully bring a little bit more of my message into making sense. Is I want you to understand, when it comes to time, when it comes to space, space and time is an illusion. Now, what do I mean space? We kind of already understand what I mean as time as an illusion with the different dimensions, past, future, past, present, and future. What do I mean when space is illusion? Now, the best one that I can explain is we are made up of atoms, and we are all atoms on an energetic grid that's connected. Now, this is a grid of light. And this is kind of what I mentioned in the beginning of this video, where we're going to be touching on the fact that I believe we live in a fractal holographic matrix, a matrix of light. And I will die on that hill. I will die on that hill. Now, you can look up some of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about on physics.org. Now, how am I going to explain and prove to you that I believe we live in a fractal holographic matrix? The study that they did, I think it was called wave particle duality. And what they had done as the study was they took, I believe, was it protons? Let's see. Yeah, it was protons, and they were shooting it out of a gun. And they didn't have a camera. They weren't able to see this, but they were firing these protons, and they expected, you know, what you would think is dot, 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 dot. But what they actually saw on the target that they were shooting at was a wave pattern. Now, this suggests that everything first exists as a wave of light until it is activated, and by basically an observer interacting with it, and it actually then materializes and becomes that. But basically just trying to say that everything begins as frequency or a wave of potential first. Now, this is the name of the experiment. Excuse me, the double slit experiment. That was the name of it, not wave particle duality. That is actually just the name of the discovery, I believe. Now, this basically touches on the fact that even electrons are conscious, because that means what they ended up doing was they took a camera, and I believe they put it in the box after they realized it was creating a wave formation. And the minute the camera was put in, it became the dot, 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 thus proving the once it's observed, then it interacts with the observer. Until then, it is just a wave of light. Really confusing. I'm going to try to add information on the screen that hopefully makes a little bit more sense. But yeah, all I'm trying to get at is everything's conscious. Atoms are conscious. Electrons are conscious. And with that being said, I just hope, I know when I learned that information, I was a lot more conscious, no pun intended, with how I acted, how I felt, how I treated even, you know, my objects, my material items, just knowing them being conscious even to a certain extent and materializing once I interact with it. Now, this kind of sounds far-fetched, and I know the first time I heard this information, it was a lot for me to soak in, and I didn't really understand it all that well, and it took multiple times of me absorbing this information before it finally started to resonate and fully make sense. The main thing I'm trying to get out of space being illusion is basically atoms, like I was saying, are made up of 99.999% space. all that's holding everything together is electromagnetic forces. That's what holds everything together. Now, if we to remove all of that space, with it being 99.999% space, we could fit every human being in a sugar cube if we removed all of that space. Now, what Billy Carson was kind of touching on with that is, you know, kind of like the higher dimensional beings phasing in and out of our reality. Same with our physical objects, why we're unable to phase through things, but there's, lore of military suits being able to change its frequency and being able to pass through walls, pass through certain solid objects that we would consider magic, but is just advanced science. Now, yeah, I guess that's what I wanted to get into. Okay, now we're touching base on the quasi crystal that I had mentioned. Now, quasi crystal, what science had discovered, it was actually an eighth dimensional object. I believe it was an eighth dimensional quasi crystal, and when they turned it to a particular angle, it caused a shadow and created a fourth dimensional quasi crystal. And then when I took that fourth dimensional quasi crystal and turned that at a specific angle, it cast a shadow of the sphere, thus touching on what I was talking about, our 3D sphere world being a shadow of a fourth dimensional quasi crystal. Also kind of touching on the idea that I believe all of our realities are all just layered on top of one another, and we don't necessarily have to travel long distance to get to those. We just have to change our inner frequency to shift to those realities, those dimensions. But because we came into this world disconnected from source, our ability to do that has been lost over time. Now, I'm really glad I'm bringing up source right now, because I wanted to talk about kind of touch place on Christ and Jesus again. And I just want you guys to know, I was raised Christian. I was raised in a Protestant family. I didn't necessarily have the most positive experience with it, but the story of Jesus, the story of Yeshua, is heavily known throughout religions, and it's also noted in esoteric and ancient information, and it's important to touch on. So I don't want you to think I'm trying to make this super religious or anything. I'm not super religious, but Jesus, or Yeshua, is a very prominent character when it comes to spirituality, as well as hidden tech, hidden stories, hidden civilizations. Now, in the book of, I don't know if it was in the book of Revelations, but in the Bible, he does state that the Christ will return. And Christians have interpreted that as the coming of Christ before the apocalypse, or after, Mark of the Beast and yada, 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 all that. Anyways, I don't want to get into the doom and gloom of all of that. But what I honestly believe, it's not going to be the return of Jesus Christ. I believe it's going to be the return of what Jesus Christ was able to tap into, and that's the Christ consciousness, the higher self, the all the forgotten knowledge that was disconnected from us when we incarnated here in our current life, here in our 3D reality. But I do think the Bible has truths in it, but I do believe the Bible has been heavily doctored to the point where it might just serve only a specific group of people. So I had a few people talk about, they wanted me to go a little bit more into the day-to-day geopolitics that have been going on, because that is ultimately where I want to end up, is covering everyday politics after giving you guys this information. And that way I'm able to help you discern or understand, or even help me understand once I'm hoping to build a big enough of a community where we're able to fact check each other, have a progressive conversation about, really embodying this new frequency of new earth that I am really, really, really hoping and trying to manifest for everybody. Now, I do want to say disclaimer because of certain speech restrictions, as well as certain things being banned. I want to say that I do not judge an entire group of people. I judge every person individually on their own basis, on their own actions, not the actions of a group. You'll understand what I'm talking about here in a minute, but some of this stuff that will be mentioning is allegedly, and I'm hoping that will keep my video from being taken down at any point. Now, there are a lot of concerns about free speech, especially with the purchase of TikTok from Larry Ellison. Now, there is a lot going on with the technocrats. And now, what is a technocrat? That is a new term that even I just even recently just started to fully understand what it was, who they are. And technocrats are just basically people who believe that technology would be better at ruling than an actual human. They would rather rule off statistics and things that benefit them making money. And when a lot of people are able to talk, and with this awakening that is happening, they're going to try to slow down communications as much as possible, because I truly believe we are witnessing the death rattle of the old paradigm. That is why everything is so loud right now, because it's dying. It's a dying paradigm, and they're losing control. And the people that are waking up, there's no way we can go back to before I knew, and we all knew this information. Yeah, I'm going to talk more about the elites in my next video. I really want to spend a good amount of time talking on them, the influence and the power and the control that they do have over everybody. Now, some people may or may not like what I'm going to bring up next. I really don't care. If me bringing up this person's name bothers you in any bit whatsoever, maybe my videos aren't the best for you. But I am going to be talking about both right and left, the wrongs of both right and left. The more I do my research, the more I look into things, I just realize the right and left is just an illusion, just like everything else. And it's meant as an illusion to keep us divided. And the anger around this person's death is being fueled to continue this divide with everybody. Now, I'm sure you probably already know I'm going to be talking about Charlie Kirk. Now, the people, if you want to follow the best information on his assassination, highly, highly recommend Candace Owens. I know she is a very polarizing figure. I definitely don't share a lot of similar views as she does, but we are both mothers around the same age. We both want a world where our children are going to be safe, where it's not ruled by pedophiles, where we're not funding a foreign country's 8 wars, I believe they're going after. Anyways, but yeah, with the Charlie Kirk thing, love him or hate him, he was getting very, very, very close to information that was very dangerous, and he was making people very nervous. Now, there were a lot of pro-Israel donors that came out after he died, trying to spin a certain narrative to make it seem in favor, and it was all for a reason. Now, on Candace's podcast, she dropped, before she took her 10-day hiatus, that Charlie Kirk, in fact, was very nervous because he was being morally blackmailed, in his words, by pro-Israel donors who did not want Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, who were actively speaking out against Netanyahu's genocide in Gaza. And the fact that they wanted to speak out about it and use Turning Point TPUSA's platform, their stage, they weren't having it. They did not want her a part of it. He feared for his life. He even said that he was afraid they would kill them. Now, who's they? Well, I'll save a little bit more for next time, but a couple names I highly recommend you looking into are Bill Ackman, Josh Hammer, Seth Dillon. Few of them were in the text chain too, but they denied. That being said, Netanyahu only also read 2 sentences of the letter that Charlie Kirk had sent him, and also failed to mention how Charlie Kirk was afraid for the future of Israel because of the radicalization or the radical ideas they were having. Now, I'm specifically talking about the Zionist regime. Specifically, the Zionist regime. I don't mean all Jews. We don't need that kind of hate speech. People saying they wished Hitler finished the job. Killing and violence is not going to get us to this new earth. We need to find a way to work together to go after the actual people who are manipulating and orchestrating all of this chaos. And Charlie Kirk was very close and knew some of the big figureheads, the big puppet masters behind the curtain that we don't see. And they don't want us to see them. They don't want us to know their names. But in an age of social media and the internet, it's going to be really hard to keep all of us quiet. Now, there has been one other thing about the whole Israel and Gaza conflict. Now, there is currently a ceasefire going on, but when I was looking into it and when I was watching one of my podcasters, Ian Carroll did a really good job covering this. There was a little loophole in it that they basically required that a Palestinian technocrat be the one that was to be in charge now. Like I said, technocrats starting to really weave their way in to every situation. One of the other topics that some of the other people have been asking me to cover are the topics on 3i Atlas. Now, I'm getting a lot of conflicting information. I'm not really sure. I really honestly need to wait until November, December before I'm able to say more when 3i Atlas is going to be in its closest visible approach to Earth. It did just pass by Mars. There's a lot of speculation going on with what happened when it passed Mars. There's a lot of talk of people saying it's an alien probe. I genuinely don't think it's an alien probe. Based off the study and the research that I've been doing, the aliens have already been here. They've been here for a long time. I don't think it's a probe. I do think there is some interstellar, higher dimensional stuff going on with 3i Atlas. I do not know, just because I'm not able to get any concrete stuff that I feel really good about. So I'm not going to say a whole lot more about that currently without knowing a little bit more for sure. I will say, though, there was a really, really strange coincidence, though, that when 3i Atlas was actually passing by Mars, that NASA's website was down because of the government shutdown. I think the government shut down for a few reasons. I think there's a few things going on that they kind of wanted to pause, put a halt on. But yeah. Now, like I've said multiple times, I am really, really, really excited about the next episode, and I plan on doing a deep dive into the mega corporations, give you guys some names, stories, definitions, examples, as well as I also want to give you a little bit of a quick history lesson that I never learned in school in my American education about our history with Israel, the Zionist regime, and a little bit of our own troubling past, because America's got some stuff hiding in the dark. Got some skeletons in the closet. We're gonna be covering that next time. But yeah, so I will be touching on more modern events. We are going to be taking a break on the whole like dimensions, metaphysical ideas. We are going to be talking a little bit more historical stuff that we've heard about that's going to be a little bit easier to digest. I still will touch base and probably do deep dives on specific subjects to give you guys further clarification and further information, just so that way it makes more sense. I just don't want to keep these episodes going on and on and on and on about quantum physics and metaphysical ideas and just bore the living hell out of you. I want to start connecting it to the threads that exist, that created our country, that created the reality that we live in, and the systems that we're fighting and hoping will eventually, really, these systems that just need to crush, like just fall and crumble. We just need to build new systems. The way we are living things today is not sustainable. It's not sustainable. Well, anyways, thanks for coming with me behind the curtain and beyond the veil. I'm really excited to go into more of our modern history compared to the ancient history that we've been getting into, and just start tying everything in so it makes more sense. I did finally create a TikTok page. I am going to see if I can link it in this video. I'm not sure. I'm still really new to this whole videotaping, posting, editing, TikToking. I do want to post shorts on TikTok that I will be moving over here to the YouTube channel as shorts, just so that way it's smaller amounts of information for you to digest. That's probably where I'm going to start dropping more metaphysical and quantum physics ideas. So, but yeah, as Candace would say, we don't know, but we know. And again, I'm Jess. Thanks for joining me on Tangled in Truth, the Red Thread. I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Until then, stay grounded, spend time with your loved ones, enjoy everything before catastrophic disclosure happens and our paradigm changes for good. See you next time.